Hello, my brothers and sisters. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Steven. Today we're going to be doing a bit more loose format. Let me know if you like it down in the comments section below. This was a presentation I gave a while back in my Elders Quorum about temple and family history. So just to start off, I gave a story about the temple. So on my mission I met this one guy who was a devout atheist for about 40 years. He absolutely refused to believe in God. But then he went to Salt Lake City and he saw this white castle-like building, and he gawked at it for 15 minutes and knew there was a God, because this castle was the Salt Lake City temple, and the temple itself stands as a testimony as to the dedication that Latter-day Saints have to God. It took us about 40 years to build it, and we had to go through so many things about like burying it so that when the military came through they wouldn't see the foundation, and people came from miles around to work on it, and it's a true dedication to our dedication to God. It's a monument, if you will. And so that's just an example of how amazing temples can be. And so when we're talking about temple and family history, we always have to bring up Malachi 4:5-6, which reads, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to the fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse." And so the main key here is that God's going to God through Elijah is going to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children. And he does this through temple ordinances. This is what happened when Elijah visited Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery in the Kirtland Temple. He gave them the priesthood authority to perform the ordinances we do in the temple, where we do things like baptisms for the dead, where we are baptized on behalf of the people that are already dead so they can have a chance to accept Christ and go to heaven and all that awesome stuff. And so but the main purpose is not just to get our ancestors into heaven, it's to form a close knitted bond with them, to turn our hearts to them. We learn more about them through doing stuff for them and doing family history work where we learn more about them in general. So the language of ritual is specifically symbolism. We necessarily must seek to find meaning in the rituals and the ordinances of the gospel, or they will never have significant power to change our lives. That was a quote by Alonzo Gaskell. And so he's talking about the language of ritual, and that's what the temple rituals are. We got to learn the language, the symbolism behind them, and the significant power to change our lives that is about them. So that's what we're talking about, is language, specifically the language of the Spirit. This is what Joseph B. Wirthlin is talking about when he says, "First I know as never before that there is a form of communication that transcends the power of words. Words, indeed, they are indispensable, but there is a great deal more to understanding than the use of mere words. As all history attests, an alien spirit may reduce the clearest language to naught, but a medium of futility and frustration." And so he's talking about the language of the Spirit. It transcends words. It's an alien spirit to us secular people in this secular age, and it reduces our language to a thing of naught, and from that we become frustrated about the limitations of our written language. And so over here you'll see I have an image of an alien. For those of you who don't know what that alien is from, I'm gonna show you, because now we're going to talk about Arrival. Spoilers. It's an amazing movie, amazing sci-fi movie. You should all go watch it. probably before you watch this. Uh, it was directed by Denis Villeneuve. He's just an amazing director, and I'm going to be comparing the heptapods. You see these spaceships that are in the movie, and I'm going to be comparing them to the temple. That's definitely not what Denis Villeneuve had in mind when he directed the movie, but I can't help but see the connection with my Latter-day Saint lenses, so we're going to talk about that. The movie Arrival is about facing the fear of existence. You know, existence is such a scary thing. We don't know what's around the corner, and we're worried about the tests and trials that we have to face. We're worried about what people think of us. We're worried about what to eat, what to wear, everything. We're just existence itself is such a scary thing. And so what happens in the movie is these heptapods, these spaceships, appear around the world. 12 of them appear around the world, and nobody knows what to do about them. So they're all each country is investigating them independently and trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And we're trying to figure out, what is your purpose on Earth? Or we're asking, what is the alien's purpose on Earth? But I think when we're talking about the temple, that's what we go to the temple to learn about, is what is humanity's purpose on Earth? Not just what our temple is doing on Earth, but what is humanity's purpose on Earth? And so when the people first enter the spaceships, the pods, there's this imagery that I think was very deliberate, where it looks like you're walking to this bright light. It's a symbol of death. You know, we always think about death being that don't go towards the light because you'll die, kind of a thing. And so, because we always think of death as being a light at the end of a tunnel. And so that's what this imagery right here is. It's something that forces us to confront existence itself. And so here I have a room in the temple where we do endowments, and on the left and on the right is the inside of the pods, the spaceships in Arrival. And you see, I couldn't help but notice this similarity between the two, that on one side you have humans that are standing in front of these weird symbols, and they're trying to understand what they are. And the symbols appear on this veil type thing, and on the other side is this wider area, this wider room, this brighter place that we're trying to get to. And so we're here to learn about the symbols so that we can properly communicate our way through the veil and to the other side, and potentially meet God and, see what's behind the curtain. And so here we see Jeremy Renner, Hawkeye himself, is trying to communicate with the beings on the other side of the veil. They're these giant alien creatures, and when you first see them in the movie, it looks like a hand. They just look like a giant hand, and so you could call it the hand of God or something like that. Or at least that's what I think it is. But the main character of the film is Louise, played by Amy Adams, and at the beginning of the movie she says, "Memory is a strange thing. It doesn't work like I thought it did. We are so bound by time, by its order. Maybe there's a higher order." And that's what we go to the temple to figure out, is to figure out if there's a higher order to things. And we realize that time itself is not as we think it is. We're not as bound by time as we think we are. There's something higher, is what we're talking about. And so that's the whole theme of the film, is time, getting us to see time in a new way. And so in the beginning of the film, we see on the left here, from the top to the bottom, we see Louise playing with her daughter. Then we see Louise is in the hospital with her daughter, and then her daughter's dying from this incurable sickness. and then she dies, and Louise is walking around very sad. But then in the next shot, we see her walking through a school campus, and our minds, because we're so attuned to seeking patterns and everything, we think that the image that follows immediately comes after the image before, and this is what's called the Kuleshov effect, as explained by Alfred Hitchcock over here, where the face on one side and the face on the other side are the same, but the middle is different. And so the man looks, he's a woman and child, smiles, he's a kind old man. We register that as he's a kind old man. But if we replace the middle image with a girl in the bikini, so he looks, girl in the bikini, smiles, now we think he's a dirty old man. He's looking at girls probably 50 times younger than himself, and so he's a dirty old man kind of a thing, in a sexual manner. And so that's what's happening over here. Going back over to the left to this arrival screenshots, we think that Louise's sadness in one image follows the other. So we think that Louise in the bottom image is the same Louise as the top image, but it's not. These are two different Louises from two different periods of time. As we find out later in the movie, that she's having a flash forward, almost like she's remembering something in a way. But here's the thing. This is sort of before and after she goes into the spaceships to meet the aliens, the heptapods. So when we see here, we see the top image of Louise mourning her daughter. She's walking in a circular pattern, and below we see Louise walking in a straight manner. This is to indicate how her perception of time and how it's changed. We learn that the Louise down here at the bottom, we think that she's, at the beginning of the movie, we think she's supposed to be mourning her daughter, but she's not. She's just a complete blank slate. She hasn't even had her daughter yet. We don't know anything about the past Louise. We know more about the future Louise than the past Louise. We don't know anything about the past Louise. And that's how we view time itself, is that you'll see that Louise down there is walking in a straight pattern. Future Louise is walking in a circular motion. Right now we see time like past Louise. It's an arrow. In English we read things from left to right, so we see things from left to right. Though in other languages they perceive things differently, because some languages read things from right to left, like Japanese, their books are backwards, and it's weird, but and it has a direct impact on how we see things. And so, as an example of the limitation of language, Louise gives the example of kangaroos, where the first white people to visit Australia asked the indigenous people, "What is that thing over there?" And the indigenous guy said, "Kangaroo," and so we call them kangaroos, but it wasn't until later we figured out that kangaroo means "I don't understand." So our language is very limited. We have a hard time understanding each other and communicating with each other. And so that's why the heptapods came to give us a new language. The aliens came to give us a new language to more fully unite the world, to give us a better understanding of each other. And their language, the words that they use are in a circular manner. The symbols, their written language is a circle, and they're able to communicate an entire sentence in that one circle. And so instead of reading from left to right or right to left, they just see everything as at once. They see everything as going in a circle. And so, to talk more about circles, Joseph Smith said, "I want to reason more on the spirit of man, for I am dwelling on the body and spirit of man, on the subject of the dead. I take my ring from my finger, and liken it unto the mind of man, the immortal part, because it had no beginning. Suppose you cut it in two, and it has a beginning and end, but join it again, and it continues one eternal round. So with the spirit of man, as the Lord liveth, if it had a beginning, it will have an end. And so this is why Latter-day Saints believe in the pre-mortal life. We believe that we existed before this life, because in order for us to live after this life, we needed to have no beginning, so that we can have no end. Most religions teach that you just spontaneously came into existence upon birth, and somehow they believe that you will continue after death. But this is impossible, according to Joseph Smith, because eternity has to be like a ring. It has to, in order for something to not have an end, it also can't have a beginning. It has to be like a ring. It has to be one eternal round. And so, when we start thinking like this, the movie brings up this hypothesis called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, where when we when we learn a new language, we start thinking in that language. We start thinking in new ways. I asked one guy in the Elders Quorum about this, and he talked about how when he learned Portuguese, he learned words that he didn't know before. He didn't know how to describe things in a certain way until he learned certain words. Like in German has all these different words that so many different languages don't have, and so Germans are able to give better descriptions of certain things. They're able to better describe things because they have so many more words than most languages. And so when Louise learns the heptapod language, she begins dreaming in their language. She begins seeing these visions of her future as if she's remembering her past. Her future has become similar to her past. She can remember it like past events. And I think that's something that we need to learn to do as well. And so DNC 8867 reads, "This is God speaking. If your eye be single to my glory, your whole body shall be filled with light, and there shall be no darkness in you. And that body which is filled with light comprehendeth all things." And so in the top right we see corner, ignore Star-Lord for a moment, in the top right corner we see the eye of God. This is a temple symbol, and you see there's a ring around it, the sun, and also a curtain representing the veil. This is a very important symbol. It represents the way that God sees the world. He sees things in a circular manner instead of we humans and in a linear way. He sees things in a circular manner. And that's what the heptapod language is like, it's to teach us to see things in a circular way instead of a linear fashion. And so when Louise learns to see things in a circular way, she's able to see her future like she's trying to remember her past. She sees her daughter, and she understands that her daughter's going to gain a sickness that is incurable. And no matter what she does, she won't be able to figure out how to cure it. And so she knows that she's going to give birth to a daughter who's going to die. But she chooses to have the daughter anyways, knowing full well that she's going to die. And she loves her, and she cherishes every moment because she's able to face existence more fully. She's able to keep her daughter with her always because she remembers things. She sees the world in a circular manner instead of a linear one. So her daughter will always be with her. But her husband is unable to cope with the fact that his daughter's going to die, and so he leaves. He abandons Louise on her own with her daughter. It's quite sad, but that's existence. And learning the circular language of the heptapods, or the circular language of the temple, is something that can help us live with these existential crises that we have in our daily lives. And so when Louise finally passes through the veil and meets these alien creatures, she's able to communicate with them, and they tell her that they need humanity's help. We don't know what they need help with, but they need help. But first they had to come and help humans. They had to give us the circular patterns. They needed to teach us their language so that we would be a more unified people, to see things in a more circular manner so that we wouldn't have so many communication problems. And we could just see the world as one and see time as a circle instead of a straightforward way. And so what are these cycles? Well, I'm not entirely sure what the cycles are, but the point is to see things in a cycle, to see time as happening all at once, all the time, kind of a thing, instead of future, past kind of words. We probably should get rid of words like future and past and just see everything as the present. And so when we see everything as the present, when we know everything, we know everything that's going to happen and everything that did happen, what's the point of language? Well, that's where speech act theory comes in. When two people are getting married, they're not officially married until the minister or whoever says, "I now pronounce you man and wife." Until he says that, nobody's married. And so, but we know that he's going to say it, but nothing's official until he says it. That's what speech act theory is. That words can go beyond just simple knowledge, simple sharing of knowledge. It can just be acting. And so here are some famous circular images in the temple, some famous circular temple symbols that we can learn from. But most significantly, I think, is this symbol here on the right, where we see a circle inside a square. The circle represents heaven and the square represents earth. And combined, it represents the unification of the heavenly with the earthly, the spirit with physical matter, kind of thing. The holy and the spiritual. But more specifically, it represents man and God uniting together. And it's a circular pattern. And over here on the left, we see these Masonic kind of symbols that we also get in the temple that are very significant. We find these on the veil. And the compass is used to draw the circle. And so we need to learn and understand these symbols if we are to learn the language of the temple. So every time you go into the temple, always be looking for these circular patterns, these circular symbols, and try to understand what they mean entirely, and understand that they are there to help you better connect with your ancestors and with your children in the future. And so that you might see everything as present instead of future and past. And so Hugh Nibley said, the temple is a point of reference, a place where you take your bearings on the universe. And so with one last story, when I went to the Washington, D.C. temple, I first felt this amazing thing where I felt like I finally understood eternity and what it meant to live an eternal life, to live an immortal life without beginning or end. And I learned that eternity is now. It's not just in the future. It's not something that we're waiting to get to. It's now. It's happening right now. We are in eternity. We're in a cycle right now. We're in a place where we can continue onward. We're in a learning phase. And so later, this is a picture of the Philadelphia temple. Later on my mission, the Philadelphia temple was just finished being built, and they were giving tours through it before they closed it off to the public, and dedicated it to the Lord. Before they dedicated it to the Lord, they were allowing anybody to go in. And during these tours, I met this one man who desperately wanted to know about eternity. He didn't know if he could believe in it or not, but he still was fascinated by the idea of it. And so I took a pamphlet and I said to him, this is a good place to start to learn about eternity. And he took it. I don't know if he ever went but you know, I kind of hope he did before we closed it off to non-members. And so that the temple is where we go to learn about eternity. And that would be it. Thank you for watching this video. Click subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Keep it righteous.